So let's get started because it's a couple minutes after. I hope you all had a great Labor Day weekend. And just wanted to thank Selena and Bertha for all their support in between the weeks. And I see we have some guests. So welcome. Is
You?
it Mayra?
Yes, Mayra Bayone.
Oh, Myra. Okay. And Carmen. So thanks
Yeah.
for being here. Just to
Uh,
go over the agenda, and I'm going to see if I can, let me see if I can share a screen for a moment. Okay. Is it Selena? Do you have to grant me share screen capabilities?
Yes, let me do that
Okay,
for
thank
you.
you.
You should be able to now.
Okay, awesome. All right. So can you all see this? Great. Okay. So here's the agenda, and I'm just going to quickly run through our work to date. And I think we're moving along quite well. And just to get a sort of a status update of, where we're going, where we are, and um, see if we can plan some meetings for the remaining weeks, and if we can agree on the goals that we want to achieve by each of those meetings. So in terms of our work to date, wanted to thank all of you. You've been each working so hard in between these meetings, and so that has enabled us to make a lot of progress. So thank you so much. We've had 3 cohort meetings by the end of today. And I know that in addition to that, some of you have been at the end here. I also mentioned that you've been attending other cohort group meetings. So thank you so much, Nazneen, Jeff, and others. We identified 3 areas of focus for our work, which is youth and schools. Second is AAPI community, and the third is cross community or solidarity work. We created a jam board upon which has 64 of our ideas, and we categorize them along those 3 focuses, but also along 3 types of strategies: reactive, interventionist, and preventative strategies. And furthermore, Jeff has identified some government officials and entities to reach out and to gather information, has been planning a number of meetings, so we'll hear from him. Juan has also been working with me and another researcher who happens to be a member of Mocapan regarding meetings to solicit feedback, but landed on surveys instead. So when he comes on board, he'll speak to that a little bit more. And we're going to be testing the questions just to ensure clarity at a Mocapan community meeting, which is going to be this coming Saturday, September 9th. So it's not on the substance of the questions, but rather just to ensure that it's understandable. So when they are sent out, that we can get quality responses. And then last, I mentioned the meetings of the other cohort groups. Did I capture all of our work to date? Can you give me a thumbs up if I did? All right. Okay, great. So going back to the agenda here, I'm going to now turn to another document. Let's see. Let me stop share for a moment. Okay. And turn to another document which has our planning schedule. Okay. Let me share screen here. Okay. This is a little bit large for the screen, but if you see on the far left, I sort of mapped out several different dates, which lead up to November 9th, which is the day that we are going to be presenting our cohort presentation. And so what I'm recommending is that after today, that we have a meeting next week so that we can begin discussing those ideas on the jam board and begin narrowing them further. And then the second half of September meet again to just sort of finalize the information gathering from the government officials and agencies, as well as community leaders and groups, so they can start narrowing toward the top 5. I think in between, we will continue to be attending the full task force meetings, hearing other cohort presentations, also hearing from Nazneen or others who have attended those cohort presentations to see where we could reinforce recommendations, cross-reference them if that's going to be helpful. And then I'm hoping by toward the end of September that we're going to shape, have those top 5 policy recommendations, see them come to some sort of shape, and then begin working on the draft presentation. So each of these dates actually signify suggested meeting dates for us all. And the goals by the end of that meeting would be what's here in column D. So for example, September 26th, we would meet as a cohort. And by the end of that meeting, roughly agree on the top 5 recommendations. And then here, October 3rd, we would meet as a cohort and then begin to review and discuss a draft presentation. So by mid-October, as a cohort, we will continue to review and discuss the draft presentation, and then finalize that by the end of October. I hope that more of us will be able to be speaking during that presentation, so that last week practice our presentation roles and then do the presentation on the day of. So I think my question regarding these cohort meetings and goals is, whether you feel like this sort of lands along what you think, whether you think that we could be consolidating the meetings, where you think we should be meeting more frequently, and or do we need finer goals? Any feedback?
I think it's hard.
Oh,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Nazneen.
No, go ahead, May. It's okay.
I mean, I think this is a good guidepost. Because we have 64 ideas to weed through, I worry if we have enough time to narrow it down to the top 5, and maybe we might need a process to kind of hone in more quickly on what those top 5 might be, because so that process a little bit, 64 ideas, even just to chat through would take a long time, and to make sure we understand what each other wrote, because I think we all dropped it in there, but we never really discussed those 64 ideas. So I feel like that could take a long time just to discuss them, and then once we have at least a baseline understanding of it, a quick vote of what do we think the top 5 are, especially if there's guideposts of I think you shared some ideas of things, since it has to be all of the cohorts kind of coming together on the 5 policy recommendations, which ones that we think that kind of with that lens, we might be able to whittle some out. So that's the one concern I have with the schedules, how do we get from 64 to 5? And are those 64 are the top 5 actually within that 64? Are we missing something? So that's just my one concern.
Yeah, thank you, May.
I think
Nazneen?
I was going to say that one is, I think the schedule is okay. I do have a concern about the 64 ideas. I think that though a lot of them can be consolidated, maybe into different groupings. So if we're looking at youth and education, how many of those come under youth and education? And then sort of looking at that grouping and saying, okay, within that grouping, these are the 1 or 2 or 3 that we really think we need to concentrate on at this point. And going through, and I think that will narrow it down. And maybe it's not that we have 5, maybe we have, 3 or 4 or 5 topics, but within that topic, we have like 1 or 2 points that we really want to hone in on.
Yeah, so in other words, the policy recommendation might have a A and a B.
Yes.
That point, right? I understand. So if I were to recap, I'm hearing we want to build in more discussion time to go over the ideas and prior to narrowing them down. So a couple of different ideas to tackle that would be to, make our meeting time next week longer, or the next couple of meetings longer. So for example, it could be, an hour and a half for the meetings in September, or we could front it and see what we could do in 2 hours. I know that's a long time, so that's up to you. We could take homework, and start to see if we can cluster some of those ideas. I think an approach in looking at the ideas in terms of what can be table setting, so that if we set up, for example, we're recommending, we'll take the ADL's policy recommendation, for example, to have a monthly or quarterly meeting with the coalition, for example. That coalition can attend to a lot of the different finer tasks that are part of the 64, ideas. So they don't necessarily have to fall in, the top 5 policy recommendations. But what will fall within the top 5 recommendations would be, for example, to ensure that we are meeting after the end of November and meeting as a coalition with the express purpose of, trying to tackle some of these other ideas. So if you think about it that way, it may not be as overwhelming a task to whittle it down. Does that make sense?
I was also gonna suggest that, and ask, are we able to break into subgroups in these meetings? Like if we wanted to pair off to be like, I know, for example, I'm really interested in schools just because my kids are still in school. So if that's another way to help like break off, like, and have those 2 pairs of people be like, here are the top 2 things as Nazine recommended or whatever, for schools. And then each theme kind of has like some people kind of like diving deeper. If that helps us get through a lot of the carne that we have on here.
So in other words, subgroups of the 5 in our cohort.
Potentially folks like that.
A pairing of 2. Okay. All right. Okay. So we have a number of ideas on the table.
I was just going to ask Selena if we can do that because it's being recorded. Can we like do breakout rooms?
Yes.
Okay.
And also now I'm mindful that we're relying on the county Zoom. So is even, protracting the time from 1 hour to 1.5 hours, is that feasible, Selena?
Sure, whatever you need.
Whatever we need. Okay. All right. Just being very accommodating. So might we want to start out with that, or do you want like a marathon 2-hour session next week? Or yeah, next week would be September 12th. And see how far we get.
So I think I would suggest for the first one, and I mean, I'm happy to go with the group, is to have one with all of us, just to go through everything and sort of figure out what are the buckets that we want to make. And then if we have time, then, dividing into subgroups. If not, then at least we've got the buckets down and we know what we're going to be, what are the 5 top ideas or 5 buckets that we're going to be talking about. That makes sense.
That's fine.
Yes. Okay. All right. So is this do you want to try a 1.5 hour meeting, a 2 hour meeting? And then the goal would be, okay, so what I'm hearing is a full cohort meeting, September 12th. And at the end of it, identifying sort of roughly, what areas these 5 policy recommendations will fall under in light of the 3 categories that we have. Did I get that right? Okay. And are you all game for an 1.5 hour or a 2 hour meeting?
I am okay with either, but I think, and I'm fine with that. I will be going to, on Monday, the Muslim cohort is having a meeting as well, and I'm planning to attend. I think it's a community meeting where they're trying to get feedback from the community.
Is that on the same day?
It's on the 11th, I believe.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, why don't
Yeah.
we, build in maybe an 1.5 hour for each of these dates in September. And that way we know we'll have plenty of time, but we'll try to facilitate it so that, we don't go over that time.
And is this
Go ahead.
9/13 to 9/29? Is that like we need to find a date within that frame?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
So if May, I could lean on you to, just
Doodle poll it?
Yeah, that would be great.
Sure.
Okay, great. Alrighty then. Anything else about this schedule? Do we feel comfortable with the additional built-in time in these September meetings that by the end of September or 9/26, we'll have a firmer idea of what these policy recommendations will be?
One question. For
Yes,
9/13 to 9/20, are we thinking one more meeting or 2 more meetings in that time frame?
one more meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Hearing no other additional comments, I'm going to stop share here. And I believe that is all on my end. So I'm now going to turn it over to our vice chairs to do report outs. And I wanted to start with Juan, but I don't see him. So let me kick it off to Jeff, if I may, and then I will text him, Juan, in the meanwhile.
Okay. So on the government relations side, I think the cohort here had recognized that there would be some meaningful engagement at the local, state, and community level to speak with policymakers and programmatic advocates. And really with a few express goals: one, two-way education and information exchange. I think folks that we've reached out to were not necessarily aware of this task force's priorities and efforts. So scheduling those conversations at a baseline has been just valuable in itself. Second, to hear about policymakers' priorities in this space on these issues specifically. And then 3, to help understand current work, resources, expertise, and what current programs are. We recognize that we're not trying to reinvent wheels. So this has been very helpful just to get an inventory. And I would say too, where appropriate, providing relevant feedback, analysis, and expertise if asked. So we've been working to schedule a few meetings, and we've been trying to be mindful of quorum and meeting issues, but a few meetings that Ariane and I have been looking to schedule. A few off the top of the docket. One is with the Chief Equity Officer, Tiffany Ward, for October 3rd. 2 with Jim Stowe in the Office of Human Rights, September 13th. Lan Lanju, who's a recent commissioner for the state Hate Crimes Commission. They're having their first meeting tomorrow. We'll be meeting with her September 11th. Office of Community Partnerships. That'll be later in September. And then I've had initial conversations with civil liberties policyholders, with the offices of Congressman Raskin, Senator Van Hollen, and Senator Cardin, strictly informational in terms of what we're trying to do in our timelines. We've also had outreach with the White House AA and HPI initiative to inform them of the work that's happening here. They definitely have been interested in hearing about what our recommendations look like at the end of November. Two outstanding conversations that we have not calendared yet. One is with the Maryland Legislative AAPI caucus, and two is with MCPS, the racial equity team. But largely speaking, these meetings are, my hope is to be in flight for September, October. And I think having appropriate follow-up after where needed and where we're going to go. So these are sort of things that are in the docket currently here. And obviously, as we whittle down our goals and areas, I think it'll make these conversations a lot more crisp. So happy to answer any questions that folks might have related to these upcoming conversations. And obviously want to do my darndest to provide meaningful feedback once we have them up and calendared and followed up appropriately.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I think we have a little bit more information about our charge since you and I spoke, and it is focused on proposals within the county. So if we had to prioritize and try to push up some of the meetings in order to meet, that September 29th date that we just talked about, trying to firm them up, I would try to probably squeeze in the MCPS one, sometime in the next 3 weeks. And also I think with Jim Stowe, I think it'll be comfortably within that time frame as well, right?
Yeah, that one has been confirmed for MCPS. Note went in today as a follow-up, so we'll wait and I'm full confidence we'll get that calendared.
Great. And if any of you have questions that you want to convey to ask, please email Jeff and myself. Make sure to get answers from them. Originally, what we had tried to arrange was to make it to open it up to everyone in the cohort, and then I took the Open Meetings Act training, and so I don't think we can have 3 of us discussing these matters without it sort of triggering a meeting. So Jeff and I will do our best to relay what transpired in those meetings and report back out to you.
Yeah. And I'll send a note of these confirmed meetings that are confirmed with dates to the cohort, so you'll have that in advance of.
Jeff, I know you said that you were going to be with the Office of Community Partnerships. I know that I'm on the Asian Pacific American Advisory Group, and so we're meeting. I think it's the 19th. Hold on, Yishan just he scheduled it. So I don't know if you want me to bring any information there, or if the surveys or anything to do on that day. Yeah, it's on September 19th at 6:30 via Zoom.
No, that's super helpful. I think it's a question then if there's a need to, it might make sense perhaps after the Zoom to do it. I guess dependent on how much business, obviously that body will have a number of items probably. So I guess it sort of depends what would make sense in the confines of that body.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think some of the programs that are part of that are the Chinese Cultural and Community Service Center, Korean Community Service Center, myself. There is someone, the Vietnamese American Service Center Services, VAS. So, and I think Hone's on as well. So on as well. So, if the 2 of us are there, and if, you have the survey done, maybe we could even just ask them to complete the surveys and things like that so we can get the information.
Sure.
That would be great, Nazneen. Thank you so much. I think that Juan will be, leaning on you all. He's a member as well, right, on the advisory council. I think he's coming in soon, he says. but that survey will be targeting executive directors, board members, staff, and key volunteers. And he's going to lean heavily on the members in the advisory group. I think besides the survey, what would be super helpful is knowing if there is an interest and capacity by the advisory group to be involved with the work after the task force, dissolves, because part of, the work is going to be ongoing. And do they have the appetite to incorporate some of this anti-hate work into their agendas? I'm not sure what the priorities are right now with the advisory council, but what is your preliminary sense? I didn't mean to put you on a spot, but do you think that might be something that
So I think it might be. I know that several of the organizations, my organization included, are already working on anti-Asian hate work, already doing anti-Asian hate work. So I think that the organizations may be interested in doing that. I know that we've done some trainings or some Know Your Rights for several of those groups that are part of the APAG. So I do think that several of the organizations would be interested. It's also just, I think that it's good to talk to the executive directors, because I think that if it comes from them going down, you're going to have much more buy-in from staff.
Yep, understood. Yes. So maybe just mention that we may be coming around and speaking with them or being in contact by email. And so speaking of email on the surveys, welcome, Juan. And
everyone, my apologies for coming in late. Had a long day at work today and didn't get home till 7. And then, I just realized that we had a meeting at 7. And I was having trouble finding the Zoom link.
well, thank you so much for being here, especially after a long work day and jumping on. Just to get you up to date, I gave sort of an overview of the work that we've done to date, and we went through a schedule with cohort meetings and specific dates that we're looking at to get us to November 9th. And Jeff did a report out on, the meetings that he's scheduling with government officials and entities. And so I think I'll give you a moment just to catch your breath, Juan, but I know you wanted to talk about the surveys. So if we could maybe jump to Nazneen and see if there's anything that you want to share about your attendance at the cohort meetings, any lessons that we can learn, anything we can lift up.
So unfortunately, I was only able to attend one, and then my schedule, and I was on vacation, but I plan on, because they're recorded, I'm planning to go back and listen to them. But I did attend the Muslim cohort meeting, their first one, on August 7th. At that meeting, they were talking sort of about what they were looking at, their priorities were. A lot of it was looking at, how the Muslim community was being targeted in Montgomery County, looking at, inviting, and they were going to, at that point, at that meeting, they were sort of just talking about inviting the mosques and other organizations to meet to discuss the issues that they saw within the Muslim community. And that, I think, is they had originally scheduled to meet with the community members on August 21st, but they pushed it. So now it's on September 11th. So I'm planning on attending that. And then I know that I know that the Latin American cohort, I believe, met. The African American cohort met, and so because they're all being recorded, I'm hoping to go back and listen to all of those meetings, and then sort of look through my notes with everything and sort of see where the themes are that they've all come up with as well. So I'll hopefully have more to report back next week when I have a little more time to actually delve in and listen into all those meetings.
That'd be great. That's fabulous. Thank you. And after you hear what Juan's doing, if we need more manpower, you're not expected to go to every single cohort meeting. I think it was just a nice gesture for us to show support and also to see what we can learn. And I have a feeling that May might, because of her interest in the youth, maybe also pulled into the work that Juan's doing. So Juan, why don't you explain kind of the conversations that we've been having and how you landed on the surveys. You're muted. Can you unmute yourself, Juan?
Sorry about that. Would it help if I went through the slides, the PowerPoint slides that I created? Let me see here. See a share. Host disabled. Okay. I can't share the slides. Okay, so I'll just.
Now you can. You're a co-host now.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let's try again here.
Thank you, Selena.
All right. Let's see if we do this correctly. Okay. Can you see the slides? All right. Let me go here.
Not yet.
Not yet?
Okay, here we go.
Okay. All right. Great. I'll try to make this quick. So just start off, this is the API cohort community outreach plan. And to start off, we have the goal for the entire task force. And then I kind of distilled it down for the AAPI cohort down here, which is to recommend policies that reduce hate bias incidents against AAPI adults and students in Montgomery County, Maryland. And the objectives for the API outreach meetings are, plan research, conduct the research, analyze and discuss the results, draft the recommendations, and then present the recommendations on November 9th. Any questions on that before I move on? Okay.
Just to clarify, Juan, when we say research, we mean that in loosely, not in a strict academic sense, right?
Right. This is not, we're not doing any kind of dissertation or anything, but at least more how we plan our survey. That's basically, yeah. Thank you, Ariane. And focus group. Okay, so there's some options that we considered. One, the first is doing focus groups, and I put the kind of a pros and cons really. Focus group, you get higher quality information, and it's really but it's a much smaller sample size. Focus groups, for those who are not familiar, is you have a group of folks and you have a facilitator to give them a task to do or answer questions, and then we record the responses, and depending on the objective of the focus group, we come out with some trends, and and maybe we can see or accomplish what we set out to accomplish. Another option is to do what we call a targeted survey, which gives us a larger sample size, but it doesn't necessarily give us high quality information, depending on, because some folks may not respond to the survey, they may not understand the survey, or or our survey questions, maybe some of the questions, I guess, could be not clearly understood, so we may not get the responses or the answers that we're looking for. And so that's the other option. And of course, there's a third option. You can do both focus group and survey. But of course, that requires more time as well. And then there are other pros and cons, but those are kind of like just the main ones that I highlighted. So the proposal is to do one adult focus group, right, partnering with MoCoPAN, which is the Montgomery County Progressive Asian American Network. Do one focus group partnering with, student focus group, okay, partnering with Asian American Leadership Empowerment and Development, also known as AA Lead, as well as Community United Against Hate, Montgomery County chapter. They work with a lot of students. And then the third part is, of course, do the survey with AAPI communities, organization leaders, board members, staff, and volunteers. And that's the targeted survey, right? Because we're targeting folks who in active organizations that engage, that serve AAPI clients, serve folks with limited English proficiency, and kind of targeting the surveys towards them to kind of see to kind of understand what they're seeing on the ground. And the reason that we didn't have a bigger sample size as opposed to a targeted survey is mainly because it's really hard to administer a big survey, especially with communities that have limited English proficiency. It takes a lot of time. You would have to go through and translate the surveys, make it bilingual in case those community clients don't necessarily read English, and also in some cases they may not even read in their own language. They may not be able to read in their own language. So we figured, okay, we'll do a targeted one in English to the organizational, leaders and board members and staff, like executive directors and program managers. So any questions on this slide?
Juan, we actually had a conversation after this, and so there was, sort of a evolving idea, and I thought we had moved away from the adult focus group at MoCoPAN because originally when I offered that, I thought it was going to be one of a series of focus groups where you would go to different organization meetings, but then learning that the capacity wasn't there to do that, I think we pulled back from that, right? And so what I thought we landed on was to test out the survey questions just to make sure that they're clear and understandable before the survey is actually broadly disseminated.
Yeah, so I did meet, we have a volunteer named Karen Lynn. So we did talk about that. I did meet with her on yesterday, and we had discussed, we will use that opportunity to kind of test the survey questions, but also we want to take an opportunity to also kind of talk about some of the best practices that are currently being used across the country in terms of how other jurisdictions, what policies they have to kind of curb or reduce hate bias incidents. So we kind of wanted to run that by them. So the purpose of the focus group is more twofold. It would be to test some of the survey questions, but also to kind of test a kind of brainstorming session in terms of, what policies we could recommend And of course, starting off with, seeing if we can do some research and maybe present what are some of the best practices that are currently happening right now, rather than try to, reinvent the wheel and start from zero. And looking at those best practices and see how perhaps we can adjust them to fit Montgomery County, right? So that was one. And then, of course, we also talked about a student focus group. And
Sorry, before you move on,
Mhm.
Juan, so I just wanted to see if there's any other feedback, but before I do that, I might suggest that rather than saying focus group, this is more of a like a test group, on the questions, because the focus group sort of connotes the idea that the conversations that will transpire will weigh more heavily into the policy recommendations. And the concern I have is that it's not very representative of the community at large, because it's happening at one community organization meeting, and it's not open to the public. So I remember I had raised that with you. And so that, just to deformalize, the event, I might suggest that, we kind of reword what that is, because it's not really a focus group in the truest sense of it.
Yeah, we can certainly change the name. If you want to change it to a test group, we can call it a test group. And by the way, just for everybody's awareness, this is just a proposal. So, and I'm completely open to any suggestions or edits or whatever, because this is just a kind of a what I call a draft proposal. So feel free to raise your hand or chime in if you see something that you feel we can change. Yeah, perfectly welcome.
So on that note, is there anyone who has any feedback on what Juan has covered so far with respect to the adult audience?
Okay. Okay, well, if you think of something later, just feel free to we can go back to any particular slide. The second bullet talks about a student focus group. And initially we had planned to do a focus group with students as well, because we do recognize that there are a lot of hate bias incidents happening in Montgomery County public schools. But from talking with meeting Ariane, and with our other volunteer, Karen Lynn, and Ariane, I don't know if you already covered this, but apparently there had been a number of focus groups and town hall meetings with, I guess, the student union, and they had come up with a list of recommendations for the school system and for the county council, I believe, on how to what they want to, in order to help reduce hate bias incidents against Asian Americans. And I think so we're not going to do a focus group on that. This was the original proposal, but since they already have a plan and recommendations, we'll probably just revisit that, and perhaps our cohort can revisit that and see where we can help push that agenda. That makes sense, because it sounds like there was a lot of work already put into that effort by the students. And Ariane, I don't know if you want to talk a little more about that later. I think that's something that's definitely worthwhile looking at.
So I think the open question for discussion here is, how to approach the any recommendation that relates to youth and or schools. So you've now heard from NCPS and the full task force. And then you've also heard from Juan what I conveyed to him, which is that there has been a lot of work, but it's the Asian American Progressive Student Union, and Mokopon connected them with the Equity Initiatives Office at MCPS. They held a listening session. They organized by themselves town halls with different schools. They came up with a platform. And to my knowledge, they're still implementing that. There's been several turnover. Now, this is an organization, there might be some overlap with the students at KUA. I'm not sure. At KUA, the students there are grantees, they're applicants who apply for these micro grants, and that supports diversity efforts in the respective schools, and then they benefit from mentorship and training. I'm a senior advisor there, so I was involved with that effort a couple of years ago. And then a lead is the students there have done advocacy in the past. Not sure what they've done with respect to anti-hate, but there's different, there's of course a diversity of students. There are goals by the students themselves. And so the question is, where does this cohort want to join in terms of formulating a policy recommendation? Is it to start sort of in the beginning and convene the students together? Is it more to support, the platform, or to find out where the gaps are in terms of implementation and what can be done to shore that up? And so this is for open discussion now in terms of what you all want to do to move forward in this area.
And have we? I saw that you. I guess you attached their actual recommendations and from the Asian American Progressive Student Union
By email, yeah. And I see Nazneen, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, so I haven't looked at that, but I think that since we were talking about, sort of doing the buckets, and one of them was youth, I think that, and students, I think that it would be, I don't know if we need to redo the efforts that they've already done. I think that I think it would be better for us to look at what their recommendations are. And I apologize, I haven't had a chance to look at them, go through what we put down, see where they align, and see if there's any gaps from what they have or what we have, and maybe focus on those gaps.
Great. And so if I could make a recommendation is, separately, if there's interest in time, I know May has said that she's interested, that Juan, Nazneen, and May, and Jeff, if you're interested as well, to come together and go through that exercise. And so we can discuss what you find at our next cohort meeting.
Okay. Great.
Unless you want to, just come together, since we are coming together next week, and bringing your individual findings. We could discuss it next week as well.
I'm open either way. I did scan through the recommendations and demands from that effort, and there's a lot. There is a lot. So we definitely need to distill some of that information.
Okay, so let me make this recommendation. How about we individually compare and share that by email, and then if I could get a volunteer to kind of streamline them and organize, the feedback pursuant to that comparison. And so then we can talk about it as a group by the next cohort meeting. I think that'll help to move things along.
Yeah, I see. May, did
Sorry.
you raise your finger?
Yeah, I did raise my hand. Happy to help. I was just wanting to make sure I was clear that the homework was read the findings from the student groups, compare with their jam boards to see where there might be overlaps and gaps. Try to streamline, have that somehow organized in a document, like overlaps, gaps, so that we can discuss for next week. Right? So,
Yes.
and that's going to be sent to me via email, or I'll send out some type of similar Jamboard or Google Doc or something where we can drop stuff there. Sound good?
That would be great. Thank you, May.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good proposal. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, great. So now I want to move on. I want to focus more on the survey. Okay, so the next slide just has a suggested number of organizations that we will reach out to ask, their leadership, staff, volunteers to fill out the survey once we have the questions finalized. And we're still working on the questions, but it's just a group. There are try to include different types of AAPI groups. There's the American Diversity Group. That's that group. It's a South Asian group, but they work with lots of different AAPI groups. Of course, APLRC. I try to include the ones that I know have been active in Montgomery County. And Ariane, I did see your texts about JACL, so I added them here as well. But there's I don't know if you can see that maybe the text is kind of small since the list is so large. Let me see if I can blow it up a little bit.
So when I know there's another South Asian group that works with seniors and DV victims called Ashiana. And they do work in Montgomery County as well.
Okay. How do you spell their name?
I'll email it to you. It's a lot easier.
Okay. Yeah, or you can pop it in the chat. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay. Terrific. Yeah, if you think of others that are not on this list, feel free to send me an email, or probably best to send me an email, because I don't know if the chat will still be active once we end the meeting. But
and for these slides that was created, are these in the Google folder? Because how do we access this list that you have?
I can upload them. Yeah, I can upload these slides.
Thanks.
But, yep. And obviously, I know a number of these organizations are also involved with the county and others, like the Asian American Health Initiative. They're active with that and things like that. So we can certainly reach out, and also the county executives Asian American Advisory Group. A number of their members serve in that group, so we can reach out to maybe Yishen to ask for help to get the survey out to them. And of course, it would require some of us personally reaching out to those that we know and just asking them to, hey, can you help fill out the survey, and ask your leadership to help us.
So I had said that the APAG, the next meeting's on September 19th at 6:30. So I can ask you to put us on the agenda to talk about this.
Mm-hmm. That'd be great. Yep. And of course, we'll send out the survey before that, but that might be an opportunity to kind of remind them in case. These surveys, it's to be realistic. It's hard to get folks to take time to fill out surveys. So just to set expectations, but at least we'll get an idea of what's going on. Okay, so.
Great. Suggested timelines. Yeah. I
Yep.
was wondering when you might have the questions, and could we also review and weigh in on the survey questions before they go out?
So we will have draft questions by tomorrow, Wednesday.
Great.
And, you know, Karen and I were going to go over them, but we can certainly send it out to the group to kind of, one of the key things, of course, with the survey questions is how clear they are, right? In terms of what we're trying to ask, so that people don't read them the wrong way, you know. So that's the key to survey questions. It's like, you really want to ask about A, but when they're reading it, they think you're asking about B, you know. So that's going to be the key. So that's why we have the test group, as Ariane mentioned, and you will all also be part of the test group.
Okay, great. We're running down to the last 2 minutes, Juan. So before you close out on this, I might suggest that you look at the project timeline and just make sure they're aligned with some of the goals and the dates that we have down there. So you can check your email for the link. It's called Project Timeline.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
a little bit more aggressive,
Right.
but if you don't mind that some of this work is happening after we as a cohort are narrowing down on the 5 recommendations, then that's okay. But I'm assuming that you want to get that feedback in. And we can adjust the 5 recommendations too, but we're trying to narrow down what they are by September 26th.
Okay. Yeah, again, these were, you know, this was just a suggested timeline. And then jumping, just quickly, two more slides. So one talks about more of the survey goals, right? You know, assess where the API community members with limited English proficiency, where they get their information about the, you know, what the county's trying to communicate to them, and also just news, like where do they get their news information, and so that at least we'll know if the county wants to, you know, provide information, you know, who they should, or who or what, maybe there's ethnic media that they should use to reach out to these communities. Another goal is just to solicit, you know, some policy recommendations to help reduce the hate bias incidents. And then, of course, capture community organizations' needs that are relevant to hate bias incidents. Like, you know, what do community organization needs to address some of this? And then, of course, this is the survey objectives, right? This is what we will use to kind of draft the questions, and it's, I'll just let you read them. But again, a lot of it has to do with, the first 2 has to do with, you know, how do limited English proficiency community members get their information? Some demographic information would also be helpful. And then, you know, what do organizations need? And then one, at the very bottom, you know, we also have questions about how can APIs show solidarity with other community organizations that are experiencing hate bias incidents. And we feel that's also a very important objective. So I'm going to stop here and just kind of see if there are any questions or concerns. I know it's a lot.
I would suggest that we insert a question about, you know, where would community members turn to if they encountered bias incidents? Because it would be instructive to us, you know, whether they largely turn to neighbors, family, faith leaders, or community leaders. And then those, what I call navigators will, you know, if they're going to take part in helping that affected party navigate through the court system or social services or victims funds or what have you, that they would be key people to ensure know about, you know, different government programs and services, as well as community organization resources as well. So if anyone has additional questions for Juan, if you could submit them to him by tomorrow, I think he's going to send us the finalized survey questions. And then we will get moving. So I know we're a little past time already, but are there any comments, questions, or concerns before we adjourn? Nope. Nope. Okay. Well, thank you so much. As you can see, we covered a lot of ground, and our next meeting will be next week, Tuesday, same time. So till then, see you or email. Thank you. And good night.
All right.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.